But new data out in the last week shows a potential shift in those numbers. Take a look at the latest numbers from Abacus Data, for example, with the Liberals and Conservatives just 3 points apart. Here to break down what it means is Abacus Data founder and CEO David Coletto. Hi, David. Good to have you back in studio.
Great to be
back. Hope you had a great summer.
Thank you.
I wanted to start off because I noticed also in the past few days you're not alone, right? Like you've had them pretty closer than other pollsters for most of the summer. We now see Angus Reid showing a similar pattern. What is the genesis of, you think, the closeness of the two parties' popular support at this point?
Well, I think one is that the coalitions that elected or voted for each of these two big parties hasn't really changed all that much, right? The 43% who voted for Mark Carney and the Liberals remain pretty much in behind that party today, and the same is true of the Conservatives. So I don't, like a honeymoon is a period I don't always like that term, because it implies that like people are going to go back to hating their spouse or not liking their spouse.
I mean, sometimes.
Maybe that happens, but I think what's probably happening right now is like you got a new car, right? And it still smells new, but the polish or the shine is coming off, that a few dents have happened because you've driven it through some rough roads. And that's really what the Carney government's facing. It's a tough environment. The public's really anxious. The world is uncertain. And so I think what we're seeing is perhaps a return to kind of more normal numbers, but let's be clear, like a 3-point lead is still a 3-point lead for the Liberals. And when you look at the underlying numbers, the government's approval rating, how people feel about Mark Carney, they're still relatively good. They're way better than they were for Trudeau over the last 3 or 4 years of his premiership. And so the government still has political capital, but it's starting to move. And I think this is an indication that they just can't assume that the public is just going to wait and wait and wait and not feel the anxieties of things not getting better.
Tell me a little bit about what you've been able to ascertain as to what people are anxious about, because I think, like, we know the Trump, we've become a little bit accustomed, I think, to this, not necessarily in a good way, but just sort of like, okay, we know Trump is uncertain and unpredictable, and the threat is very real. The damage to the economy, clearly, with the latest data out from StatsCan is very real as well. But we have anxiety about other things, too, and I think your data underscores that.
Yeah, and the anxiety is all being made potentially worse by Trump, but it is the cost of living, it's the cost of housing, it's access to health care, it's increasingly my job security. That wasn't something anyone really worried about for the last 3 or 4 years. You know, they worried about being able to afford to pay for things based on their income, but they weren't worried that we're going to lose their income. And so these job numbers and these contraction in the economy that StatsCan reports last week, I think is driving the economy broadly up the list, but it's not the macro economy that people are worried about. They aren't sitting around being like, I need that new major project built. It's who's going to protect my job? Who's going to make sure I can feed my family, that I can pay the rent? And I think, you know, when I reflect on what the government's done over the summer, it's focused on trying to get a trade deal with the U.S. because in this town, we all know that matters. But the public isn't connecting the dots between why a long-term stable relationship with the United States is going to ultimately translate into stability in their own lives. And I think the government probably needs to do more of those connections.
I think that's a very interesting point, because I think, you know, at a top-line level, most Canadians understand these projects get built or big stuff gets done. Likely there will be positive economic impacts. But I don't know if the government has exactly drawn a straight line or been, you know, very detailed in the way it describes, like, what we are doing in the aggregate is going to make your life better. Do you anticipate that that will be something they have to do this fall in particular?
I think so. I've been saying, like, Mark Carney is you can see his attempt to try to want to demonstrate to people that by fixing the macroeconomic problems in this country, we can solve for the micro. We can solve for the cost of living and housing. And he did that somewhat effectively, I think, during the election, but it was all framed around, I can protect you from Trump. Right. Now that the public, I think, has become numb to Trump, it's come to recognize that this is the normal. Like, chaos is normal. So what are you doing to help me now, I think, becomes important. And it's going to be particularly problematic as we head towards a budget in which the Prime Minister himself is using the word austerity to describe some of the things he wants to do. It's harder to ask people to sacrifice if that's what he's going to ask them to do at a time when they already feel like they are.
That's a very good point. What about, if those are the potential headwinds for the Liberals, what are the potential headwinds for the Conservatives based on the data you're seeing? We've seen a lot of Mr. Poilievre in the last week, and in particular talking, you know, he sent out this open letter, we're going to talk about it with the front bench in a moment, itemizing like the priorities, and they're, you know, the very familiar ones, right? The cost of living, immigration, crime. Like, what are the potential headwinds for them heading into the fall?
Well, I think one of the clear things in terms of headwinds is that what his supporters want and what they prioritize are actually very different than what the other half of the country wants. So he's going to have a limited ability to expand the audience, to bring people in, I think. And I don't know if their strategy is actually to do that, and maybe they've determined they can't, and so they're going to double down on the issues that engage their own supporters, that maybe ensures he gets his big leadership review number in January. But I also think destiny's almost out of their hands, that in a way that without the New Democrats getting their act together, the Conservatives, even if they hold their 40%, may not get much beyond that. And so one of the things I think that Mr. Poilievre has been very good at previously when Mr. Trudeau was the Prime Minister was setting the agenda. It was almost as if he was the government and the government was the opposition because he could just set the agenda. We'll see if he's able to do that. Trump makes that harder, but we saw last week with the temporary foreign worker program that he still has maybe some of that magic where he can set the agenda and force the government into defense. He's going to try to do that on, as you said, on immigration, on crime, on all those issues that Conservative voters tell us are high up on their priority list.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. Appreciate your analysis as always, David. Thank you.
Thanks, Vashi.
David Coletto is the founder and CEO of Abacus Data.